I should like to pay a compliment to the Prime Minister. I'm sure this will not be disagreeable to him at a time when there are more brickbats than bouquets in the air around him. It cannot, it is true, be an unqualified compliment, but I trust it will not be despised on that account. In the days before 1974, James Callaghan was one of the doughtiest opponents of Britain's membership of the common market. He made many fine speeches, exposing the disadvantages, both moral and material, which would attend upon that fateful, though happily reversible step. He voted solidly through the session of 1972 against the European Communities Bill, an act still on the statute book unamended, which made our entry possible by stripping the British Parliament of its historic right to be the sole source of legitimate power in this realm. What is more, he indicated the minimum requirements of Britain's interests that must be met if we were to remain associated with the common market, and he made no bones about declaring that they were incompatible with that crucial section of the 1972 Act which abrogated Britain's political independence. Hopes therefore were high among patriotic Britons when in March 1974 none other than James Callaghan became Her Majesty's Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. And it is at this point that the complimentary allusions which I am making have to be qualified, indeed very severely qualified. Yet I will draw, as best I can, the kindly veil of palliation over the dismal interlude which followed. Backed though he was by a large majority of his cabinet colleagues, as Harold Wilson has revealed in his recent book, constrained and strengthened though he was by his own words and actions of previous years, the Foreign Secretary succumbed in little more than 2 months to the mephitic atmosphere of the Foreign Office. His single-handed determination proved insufficient to make head against the serried Mandarin ranks which had closed around him. He was overborne and made captive by those who were determined that parliaments and politicians might come and go, but that this island should remain a predestined province of the new super-state of Western Europe. It's not my intention to harrow your feelings by recalling in detail the dismal and even disgraceful story of the year which followed. I hasten onward to the more hopeful present. For scarcely had the deluded voters recorded, albeit a minority vote, at the referendum for reaffirming the renunciation of Britain's political and parliamentary independence, when one class of a community after another discovered by practical experience that their interests had been betrayed and their credulity had been practiced upon. Every promised and predicted benefit was swiftly replaced by an evident disadvantage or disaster. British industry found the expanded market was a bonanza for their competitors. British commerce discovered that their trading surplus with the rest of the world was swamped by a deficit with Europe. The farmers found that they had exchanged the decisions of their own government for the ruthless exploitation of the common market rules by others to their disadvantage. The fishermen became aware that Britain's right to defend her fishing grounds had been surrendered in advance. Above all, the consumer, the housewife, and among consumers, the poorer consumers in whose budget food bulks largest, learnt that they had been deceived. They had been told that before Britain there stretched the prospect of a world of scarcity, a world of higher prices, a world that would no longer have a surplus to sell to Britain, and that they ought to be grateful to take refuge in the safety of Europe, where supplies would be safe and guaranteed, and priced upon the whole at levels advantageous in comparison. Of course, it was the opposite that happened. As the electorate had been warned by those to whom too few would listen, the world market speedily resumed its normal complexion, which for a century and a half had made Britain the crossroads of the oceans and given her people the highest standard of living of any industrial nation in the old world. Listen to what the Consumers Association had to say not long ago. Butter in the EEC is 270% of the world market price. Skimmed milk powder, 330%. Beef, around 200%. And wheat, around 150%. I wonder how many electors would have voted yes in 1975 if those figures had been before them then. However, I must come to that compliment, a genuine compliment, which I promised the Prime Minister. I recently asked him a question in the House of Commons. Would it not, I inquired, be of great assistance and satisfaction to the TUC and the public generally if this country were able to buy food at advantageous prices in world markets? Now, he didn't do what 9 politicians out of 10 would have done. He didn't beat about the bush and talk about security of supplies and world scarcities and countervailing benefits. He came straight out. Yes, said I think it would. It was always one of the weaknesses of our entry into the community that the common agricultural policy does not suit our requirements. They are words of truth, which deserve to be displayed in Whitehall in letters 10 feet high. It is, as the Prime Minister correctly stated it, a permanent truth and not a temporary conjuncture. The very principle of the common agricultural policy, which is the foundation, the French precondition, and the one functioning reality of the EEC to date, is a regime of self-sufficiency and high prices as a matter of deliberate policy, a regime totally incompatible with the requirements of a densely populated, highly industrialized island nation. It is something that the EEC cannot change and will not change, which is why I must part company with the Prime Minister when he continued. That's why, said he, we must pursue in the community, with some, though not all, other member countries, a policy of getting substantial reforms over a period. If it had been possible to get what's called reforms, but what really means a reversal of the whole principle of the CAP, we could have got them during the so-called renegotiation, over which James Callaghan himself presided. Then, at least, we had some leverage, as we could make it a condition of our continuing membership. Now, we have none. At least, not until we are prepared to make our own terms, regardless of whether the rest say stay or go. I'll prove the same fact another way. We should, in 1975, if we'd been outside the community, have paid £800 million less for the food which